That night, the sea did not roar. No waves rose. Yet beneath that calm surface, a crime worth hundreds of millions of dollars was silently approaching the shores of America. The coastal defense radar flickered for just a moment, catching a faint, nameless dot. It emitted no AIS signal, answered no radio calls, bore no maritime ID. A metallic object crept forward at just over 6 knots like an ancient creature crawling across the ocean floor. And then, the signal vanished. At the Pensacola Command Center, radar technicians stared at the dark screen where only the ghost of movement remained. Satellite thermal data revealed a strange shape, low, long, half, submerged, emitting so little heat that even infrared scans struggled to confirm it. A steel phantom was breaching U.S. waters. For a long second, no one spoke. Only the cold blue light of the monitors reflected on the officers' faces, and in the air hung the sense that they had just brushed against something not entirely of this world. New data streamed in from a 8 amperes Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft. The analysis confirmed it wasn't a fishing boat, a drifting buoy, or a civilian craft. 35 feet long, metallic hull, no. Sonar reflection, surface temperature lower than the surrounding water. A machine built to disappear. On the screens, engineers recognized the silhouette, the unmistakable shape of a narco submarine, the semi-submersible craft used by the Jalisco New Generation Cartel to smuggle narcotics across oceans. Inside, according to initial estimates, lay more than 3 tons of methamphetamine and cocaine, market value close to $400 million, enough to cripple an entire state. The command center immediately went to red alert. A signal was transmitted to the Coast Guard command. Now, less than 10 nautical miles separated the Phantom from the Navy's patrol zone. On the tactical map, a single red dot drifted slowly northward. No sound, no trace. Beneath the surface, only the steady breathing of a machine with intent, as if the ocean itself were keeping its secret. From the active sonar of the USCGC Hamilton, engineers detected faint, irregular echoes. Each sonar pulse came back, broken proof that the object was changing depth, deliberately evading detection. The ghost knew it was being hunted. In the absolute silence, everyone shared the same thought. They were not facing an ordinary submarine, but a weapon born from a criminal industry that had crossed into the realm of warfare. At 3,000 feet above, an MQ-9 Reaper began a parallel sweep, its thermal imaging system widening the search field. Through the infrared lens, a dim orange trail writhed like the U-plank breath of a hidden creature. The data streamed back in rhythmic flashes, each pulse a praliby, heartbeat of life. In the vast black expanse, the submarine became the only moving spark of death. Interagency intelligence officers from the Navy, DEA, and Coast Guard intelligence were called in simultaneously. On the master display, the model appeared. A matte black steel hull, diesel-electric hybrid propulsion, exhaust system engineered to leave no thermal trace. This type could travel over 600 nautical miles without surfacing. It was proof that the cartels had surpassed the boundaries of crime, stepping into the realm of dual-use technology where every hidden engineer was now a soldier in a covert war against a nation. At 2:25, the command center fell completely silent. No typing, no words. A decision had to be made. If the intruder crossed the radar threshold, it would vanish entirely into the lower thermocline. Outside, the sea remained calm, but on the screen, a small dot kept flickering, fading, returning like the faltering heartbeat of a creature slipping beyond control. In the operations room, the sonar officer noticed a sudden rise in interference frequency, indicator of active jamming. The submarine wasn't just hiding, it was fighting back, blinding the eyes of the US Navy. Streams of corrupted data flooded the screens. Sonar pings distorted into a drawn-out metallic sigh. A strange feeling crept through the control room, as if the ocean itself were shielding its offspring, hiding it from the light of mankind. Amid the chaos, the Poseidon's AI audio recognition system isolated a low, repeating 42 Hz tone. Not a whale, not natural sonar, a man-made propeller. All eyes fixed on the wavering line. On the screen, the living proof that the ghost was still moving. An intruder with intellect, technology, and discipline. In that sealed chamber, the smell of ozone from overheated circuits mixed with the thick tension of fear. Some officers exchanged glances, no words needed. They knew what lurked beneath the waterline. A criminal empire that had learned to fight like a navy. And that night, in the heart of the Gulf of Mexico, the boundary between war and smuggling was erased forever. No one knows exactly when the ocean became a battlefield, but at dawn that morning, it chose a side. From an altitude of 3,000 feet, the MQ-9 Reaper glided silently across the black void of the Gulf of Mexico, its infrared lens widening its scan to every square meter of the surface. On the control screen, a faint orange streak began to emerge, a wavering trail, weak yet persistent, like the heartbeat of a creature in flight. Each frame was a pulse, and in the command center, the engineers understood they were tracking something that possessed awareness. Beneath the waves, the submarine moved at a depth of 62 feet lower than predicted. The sound of its engine emitted a low, steady frequency, so regular that the USCGC Hamilton's passive sonar had to deploy automated filters to separate the signal from the ocean's ambient down. The 42 Hz band repeated, precisely matching the signature of vessels used by the Jalisco New Generation cartel in previous years. The resemblance was almost perfect, except for one thing: speed. This one was faster, quieter, and smarter. 3 a.m. A command was transmitted through the highest encryption channel: track, do not engage. From that moment, it became a contest of patience and technology. Every sonar echo was recorded, every faint reverberation filtered, cross-checked, and rendered into a three-dimensional map beneath the sea. The hum of air conditioners merged with the rhythmic buzz of data streaming across dozens of screens, forming a cold, mechanical pulse for an invisible manhunt. Inside the command center, agencies converged: the U.S. Navy, DEA, and Coast Guard, intelligence. All eyes fixed on the central monitor, where the ghost appeared as a breathing dot of light. Its path was erratic, serpentine, as if testing the reflexes of its pursuers. When sonar beams strengthened, it shifted course. When the signal weakened, it accelerated. A tactic only possible for those who understood how radar thought. This was no mere smuggler. It was the offspring of a shadow doctrine, born from the dark logic of the underworld. From the skies, thermal imaging revealed two smaller vessels moving parallel, about 2 nautical miles from the target. No signals, no navigation lights. Analysts confirmed they were 4 escort boats, each carrying around 20 to 25 cartel gunmen armed with heavy dagger and weapons. They maintained perfect triangular formation around the submarine, every maneuver deliberate. Encrypted data exchanged between the 3 points, once partially decoded, revealed a low-frequency communication system transmitting every 11 minutes with return pings routed through a server in Maracaibo, Venezuela. At the same time, the SBIRS satellite detected emissions from a large, unregistered cargo ship roughly 90 nautical miles east of the target. Its trajectory matched the submarine's heading. Exactly. Transport model analysis identified it as a disguised narcotics carrier. Its outer hull, painted like a commercial freighter, its inner structure hollowed to store cargo. When all 3 data points were plotted on the map, the image became clear. A floating smuggling corridor in full operation, stretching from the coasts of South America to the gateway of the United States. 3:12 a.m. The operations room entered total silence. Only the ticking of the clock and the hiss of the air system remained. The digital map displayed 3 layers of signals: Hamilton's sonar net, the surface radar from the USS Delbert D. Black, and Reaper's thermal feed. Together, they formed a living picture. At the center, the submarine cruising steadily, flanking it, 2 escorts guarding position. Farther east, the mothership, the final destination of a $500 million payload. Each passing second tightened the tension. If the ghost crossed the sonar boundary, it would slip into the deep thermocline layer where all signals refracted away, and then it would vanish forever. The Navy would be left with only fragments of data, a lost dot in the ocean, nameless, formless, without evidence. 3:40 a.m. The AI analysis unit flagged an anomaly. A returning sonar wave, irregular, dissonant. Experts quickly recognized it. Not natural echo, but counter-sonar the enemy was, emitting reverse pulses to jam detection. Within seconds, the screens were covered in white noise. The submarine signal dimmed, then disappeared. In the silence, an alarm sounded cold and hollow, like a death knell beneath the sea. From Hamilton's coordination station, data was manually reconstructed. Layered filters activated, parsing millions of acoustic variations within minutes. A faint 42 Hz tone resurfaced, half a degree lower. The vessel was still there, moving east at 7.4 knots. It wasn't fleeing, it was testing its hunters. In the pale blue light of the control room, someone clenched a fist. A strange sensation spread, not just tension, but a primal dread. They were not facing men, but an anonymous system that could think, hide, and challenge. The whole team understood. At that moment, the pursuit was no longer a military operation. It had become a duel between intellect and darkness, between humankind and a machine born of criminal ambition. And when the final sonar pulse echoed, deep and resonant like a heartbeat from the abyss, everyone knew they were no longer tracking a vessel. They were listening to a message from the ocean itself, a warning that the war had begun. But the enemy had yet to reveal its face. There was no explosion yet, the war had begun. At 2:40 a.m., in absolute silence, a Delta level order was issued. All units switched to shadow tracking mode, pursue in darkness, no engagement, no warning. The target must not know it had been discovered. Beneath the deep thermocline, the Ghost continued to drift. Above the surface, an entire fleet held its breath. From the command station, sonar data and infrared imagery were merged. 3 assets, USCGC Hamilton, USS Delbert D. Black, and the MQ-9 Reaper formed a tactical triangle of invisible containment around the suspected area. Every sonar ping was timed down to the microsecond to avoid revealing position. The numbers on the screens became the heartbeat of an unseen hunt, where even the slightest miscalculation could let the prey vanish into the cold depths. 3 a.m. All radar systems switched to passive mode. Everything now operated through electronic hearing, listen, never speak. On the 42 Hz frequency, the submarine's engine pulsed rhythmically, like the slow heartbeat of a sleeping monster. Within 40 nautical miles, each sonar ping from Hamilton had to travel and return in under a second. But in deeper layers, sound waves bent and warped, echoing back as long metallic moans. Coordinators never looked away from their screens. A strange new wave appeared, not random reflection, but counter-tracking interference. The submarine had begun using active sonar to create illusions. Each emission scattered dozens of false echoes across the map. Hamilton's sensors flared, forcing its system to activate emergency noise filtering algorithms. But within the chaos, the AI isolated a steadier, weaker vibration, deeper, hidden the true location of the Ghost. On the surface, the USS Delbert D. Black changed course, positioning itself ahead of the submarine's projected path. Overhead, the Reaper alternated between thermal imaging and synthetic aperture radar scans. Each rotation produced a 3D thermal frame, a faint silhouette, and of something moving below. Analysts identified a 35-foot hull emitting almost no heat, appearing only as a cold streak in the ocean. No further analysis was needed, only a radar. Absorbing polymer could make a metallic structure vanish like that. At the Pensacola Command Center, interagency specialists began modeling trajectory predictions. Using velocity, engine frequency, and current flow, they determined the submarine would reach its rendezvous with the Venezuelan mothership in 2 hours. The single window to intercept a shipment worth $400 million USD before it entered the global black market trade network. An airstrike was still prohibited. The target had not yet left international waters. Every passing minute became a countdown. In the sonar bay, the youngest technician noticed an anomaly. The submarine's signal was no jet, longer, constant, brief pauses, rhythmic, deliberate, identical to manual depth adjustments. That could only mean one thing: a human at the controls. Someone was down there, fully aware. They were being hunted, calm enough to play hide and seek with the entire United States Navy. 3:12 a.m. The Reaper's sensors transmitted the clearest infrared image of the mission. A thin orange filament spiraled upward, the signature of a diesel engine running continuously to charge electric batteries. Analysts confirmed the target was accelerating to 7.4 knots. heading due east. The sudden maneuver forced the entire formation to shift. Every ship changed, heading in unison. From above, the Reaper began transmitting updates every 90 seconds, each interval a fleeting chance to lock coordinates in the darkness. In the control room, no one moved. It felt as though they could hear the ocean breathing long, deep, and cold. Beneath the waves, the submarine moved like a living being. Every time sonar found it, it shifted. Every time AI locked on, it vanished again. Together they danced human reason versus the survival instinct of engineered evil. At the corner of the room, the satellite feed displayed three distinct signals. Two smaller points moved in parallel the cartel's escort vessels, dark and silent, maintaining precise distance from the submarine. Analysts decrypted a low-frequency communication stream between the three craft, a repeating 11-minute cycle routed through an encrypted server based in Venezuela. The communication lifeline between South America and U.S. waters was active in the middle of the night. By 3:30 a.m., the SBIRS satellite detected a large thermal signature to the east, a disguised cargo vessel waiting 90 nautical miles away. Its heading, speed, and coordinates matched predictions exactly. It was the mothership, the final destination. Analysts called it phase. Linkage, the connection point of a global narcotics transport chain. If the Ghost reached that ship, the cargo would dissolve into international commerce, hidden under legitimate industrial codes. All data streamed directly to Naval Command. On the massive wall display, the target's course glowed like a pulse of blood through the dark ocean. A flat voice echoed through the comms. It's entered the transport corridor. No further explanation was needed. The entire room understood. They were witnessing an industrial-scale incursion, masked by military-grade technology, orchestrated by men the world called cartels. But in truth, they were commanding a submarine fleet of organized global crime. Time moved on. The Ghost kept advancing. Within that electronic abyss, one could almost feel the rhythm of the ocean, the heartbeat of metal, and the heavy breath of humankind, realizing that sometimes war does not begin with bullets, but with a single flickering signal in the heart of the night. There were no alarms, but the underworld of crime had just collided head-on with the power of a nation. At 3:52 a.m., the Ghost broke the surface for only 6 seconds, just long enough to vent exhaust and draw oxygen for its engines. 6 seconds that would decide its fate. Overhead, the MQ-9 Reaper's sensors locked on instantly. The infrared mark traced a 30-foot streak of orange light skimming across the sea at 8 knots. Data streamed to the Pensacola command center without delay. Every naval officer understood the same thing the moment to act had come. In the weight of the control room's silence, Commander Rachel Decker spoke through the highest clearance encrypted channel. Her voice was calm to the point of terror, each syllable cutting through the air like a blade. Execute phase Delta. In combat protocol, those words meant total authorization. Eliminate a mobile target. No. Further confirmation required. From that instant, the rules of observation were erased. The target was no longer a dot on a radar screen, it was an enemy of the state. The ship surged forward. USCGC Hamilton roared ahead at 28 knots, engines screaming through the waves. Simultaneously, 4 RIV fast attack craft hit the water, each carrying 8 fully armed agents, M4 carbines, MK-48 machine guns, and M110 SAS sniper rifles. Everyone on board knew one mistake here would be paid for in blood. Above them, an MH-60R Seahawk sliced through the sky, its GAU-21 heavy gun loaded with armor-piercing rounds laser locked onto the target. The formation moved like a single mechanism, no wasted motion, no missing command. Inside command, the electronic map displayed both sides' movements. The submarine ran parallel to 2 cartel escort boats. When the distance closed to under 5 nautical miles, Hamilton's passive radar intercepted encrypted radio chatter communication between the radio chatter communication vessels. On the 3.2 MHz band, code breakers detected recurring sequences, counterattack instructions. The cartel knew it had been found. No one had time to react before the first blast. A red streak tore across the night sky, then a barrage of AK-103 and oozy fire rained from the escorts. Bullets ripped through mist, carving glowing scars across the sea. On the Hamilton, the 50 cal M2 HB guns answered immediately. The Echo rolled for miles, merging with the helicopter rotors into a chaotic but perfectly synchronized symphony of war. Overhead, the Seahawk banked hard and unleashed a torrent of fire. The GAU-21 spat, hundreds of rounds per minute, shredding the dark. One escort boat took a direct hit at steel. Hull erupted, flames flaring skyward, shards of molten metal scattering into the waves. Beneath the surface, the shockwave distorted Hamilton's sonar for several seconds, but the system recovered fast. The submarine signal remained. It was still moving, still alive. The RIV boats closed in. Under the flicker of flares, shadowed figures leapt into the water, clamping onto the tilted hull of the sub. Magnetic hooks locked, lines secured, automated cutters began slicing into the hatch. Inside, the air was thick with chemicals, meth fumes rising like poison smoke. Pressure built, then a muffled explosion from an auxiliary chamber made the hull tremble. A lead agent set a sheet charge explosive, carving open the steel lid. When the smoke cleared, flashlights revealed chaos, sealed industrial drums, leaking white residue, and the stench of death. A cartel gunman fired from within. A round pierced an agent's vest. But before he could, fire again. A burst from the M110 ended him. In minutes, that man-made hell became the center of a life and death inferno. The roar of engines, the thunder of gunfire, the screech of tearing metal all fused into a lethal symphony beneath the night. Farther out, the remaining escort tried to flee, but the Reaper had already locked on. An AGM-114 Hellfire missile streaked downward one flash, and the sea fell silent. Again, 4:07 a.m. A coded report came through. Target compromised. Entry confirmed. Special operations teams inside the sub began securing evidence. The weight exceeded estimates over 2 tons of methamphetamine and nearly half a ton of liquid cocaine, worth more than $415 million USD on the street. Amid the chaos, one U.S. soldier took shrapnel to the Pralibris. Shoulder, blood mixing with seawater, yet he never released his weapon. When the smoke cleared, only the faint hum of the Ghost's dying engine remained. The hull listed. Systems failing. The command "Secure Package" went out. Teams withdrew with chemical samples and the sub's data core. Behind them, ruptured containers leaked toxins, white vapor, rising into the night, reflecting distant firelight. In the air hung the acrid blend of gunpowder and burning narcotics, and the grim understanding that they had just touched what the criminal world called the object of hell. The final transmission read, "Target located, package secured, hub." At command, dozens of screens flared to life. One red dot vanished from the map. A war that was never declared now had its victor and its casualty. On the surface, only the crackling locks after porting the surface. Echo of torn metal remained, mingling with the cold breath of the ocean, the only witness that this was merely the beginning of the storm below. No one in the special operations team realized that what they had just seized was not merely a submarine. It was a machine engineered to challenge a nation itself. When the order "Secure Package" echoed through the comms, every eye locked onto the live field data feed. The submarine was under control, but the readings sent back made even the most battle-hardened veterans freeze. Thermal sensors showed the engine compartment still emitting heat, rhythmic, pulsating as if something within was still alive. The vessel had been subdued, but not yet silenced. 5 a.m. The technical reconnaissance team began their structural inspection. The first report confirmed the entire hull was hand-welded from Colombian, imported steel, its exterior coated with radar-absorbing polymer, the same material used on stealth aircraft. Every seam was wrapped in carbon tape, eliminating sonar reflections. This vessel had not been thrown together in haste. It was the product of an industrial-grade manufacturing line, proof that organized crime had learned to speak the language of military engineering. When the specialists opened the control bay, what they found defied logic. No digital panels, no monitors. Only 3 Soviet-era analog gauges, a magnetic compass, and a crude throttle lever bolted straight into the transmission shaft. Yet, beneath the steel flooring, technicians uncovered a lithium-ion battery array weighing nearly 2 tons, complete with an independent cooling system. The layout was so sophisticated that one glance was enough to tell this was not the work of back-alley traffickers. It was designed by people who understood naval mechanics at a strategic level. Printed markings on the battery revealed its origin: Shenzhen Dynamics Corporation. The manufacturing seal was written in simplified Chinese, and the serial number matched a shipment exported to South America under a civilian contract 3 months earlier. The picture snapped into focus. The legitimate global supply chain was feeding a criminal fleet. While governments negotiated trade, the same industrial infrastructure was quietly producing vessels for transoceanic narcotics transport. In the cargo hold, the air was still thick with chemical fumes. Industrial steel drums, once labeled industrial anti-corrosion paint, were pried open. Inside lay over 2,200 pounds of crystal, methamphetamine, and 480 liters of liquid cocaine, sealed in epoxy resin, thermally insulated, and undetectable to drug-sniffing dogs. The street value exceeded $417 million USD, roughly 8.5 million doses. Numbers like that made it clear this was not a smuggling run. It was a chemical campaign executed with the precision of warfare. Deeper in the engine bay, engineers discovered a metallic black box bolted under the auxiliary console, hand-labeled NAV02. Inside were a microprocessor, GPS routing circuits, and a miniature satellite transmitter operating on a low military band. The system contained logs of 3 prior voyages, each originating off the Venezuelan coast and ending at different points along Florida's shoreline. 2 of those dates aligned with DEA spikes in narcotic seizures at East Coast ports. The implication was chilling. This was not the first mission, it was the third, and the previous 2 had succeeded. At 5:47 a.m., Navy divers approached the hull from outside to collect samples.
Acknowledge.
The surface temperature remained above normal, even though the engines had been offline for nearly an hour. When they cut into the stern section, they uncovered a hollow compartment containing a destroyed locator beacon deliberately sabotaged. Someone had tried to erase the trail before. The sub was intercepted, as if knowing this outcome was inevitable. Infrared readings from the engine chamber revealed a backup power source still running, pulsing faintly steady, persistent. The sonar picked up a low rhythmic tone, the heartbeat of a metallic creature, cold, methodical, unceasing. Both DEA and Navy analysts reached the same realization: this submarine was not built merely to carry narcotics. It was a prototype, the model for a mass production fleet. Every detail, the materials, propulsion system, internal architecture pointed towards scalability. This was no longer individual crime. It was a shadow industry, rising in the jungles of South America, powered by drug money and foreign engineering. Inside the tech chamber, analysts decrypted the final trace from the NAV02's data stream. The last transmission linked to a commercial satellite server in Caracas, encrypted with an algorithm identical to the Chinese military standard. There was no way to confirm who had controlled it, but that one fact alone froze the entire room into silence. This vessel was a piece of a much larger game, part of a transnational network testing America's limits in the dark. By 6 a.m., the crew of the Hamilton stood quietly on deck. They no longer saw the submarine as seized evidence, but as a sleeping entity, something that could awaken if ever rebuilt.
Confirmed.
Dawn
Thermal
broke
overlay
across the
shows
horizon,
persistent activity.
casting pale light over the slick black hull. Its metallic sheen still wet with the night salt. The ghost ship no longer moved, yet every cold weld line carried a warning. The ocean is hiding armies without flags, and every wave may carry the next strike. No one expected that when the ghost submarine was hauled back to Pensacola, the most terrifying thing about it wouldn't be the drugs it carried, but its very structure. What had just been lifted from the sea was no longer mere evidence in a criminal case. It was material proof of 2010, an underworld learning how to wage war like a nation. As the salt water dried on its scorched steel hull, every bolt, wire, and weld began to tell its story. A cold, voiceless tale of metal, oil, and silence. The first technical report sent to Naval Command confirmed what few wanted to believe. The vessel had been built with precision, far beyond the capabilities of any improvised cartel workshop. Its structural frame followed military-grade engineering standards. Welds were made from an alloy capable of withstanding twice the pressure of standard civilian vessels. The outer coating contained carbon nanocomposite fibers, the same material used in F-35 stealth aircraft. The conclusion was inescapable. Someone deep within the global system was selling that instruments of war to criminals. When investigators entered the central control bay, they found details that defied belief. Beneath, the console sat a coded circuitry array connected to a military-grade GPS module programmed to self-destruct if removed. It drew power from an independent lithium battery network, each cell bearing factory markings from Shenzhen's industrial zone. Scanning the embedded QR codes led to a trail of non-existent shell companies, invisible on any Chinese trade registry. The experts realized they were facing a shadow supply chain, a global web, where every component was laundered through layers of phantom corporations. By 6:30 a.m., as dawn light washed over the docks, the inspection entered phase 2. Forensic teams opened the auxiliary engine compartment and uncovered a parallel navigation module wired directly to a miniature satellite antenna hidden inside the hull. The onboard memory contained encrypted coordinates, each route matching a previous voyage. The data logs marked September 15 and September 22, both successful runs, both ending off the coast near Tampa Bay. The numbers on the screen were not mere waypoints, they were scars, traces of 2 incursions into U.S. waters that no one ever noticed. In the engineering section, technicians discovered a smaller metal box painted white with a simple label, Series 1 Ampere. Inside lay the master circuit board and a manually assembled, autonomous control unit built from high-end parts. The main board carried an 8-core processor designed to manage navigation autonomously when signal was lost. Each time the submarine descended below the thermocline, the system automatically triggered thermal stealth mode, reducing heat emissions to levels invisible to infrared scans. This was technology once exclusive to the world's leading navies. Its presence in the hands of a drug cartel was a chilling sign. The line between military power and organized crime had dissolved. Counterintelligence analysts concluded the vessel was the prototype of a semi-autonomous submarine series. Each unit could travel over 600 nautical miles without a crew, guided by AI.GLE's assisted satellite navigation. The control system could pre-program routes, emergence schedules, and false signal bursts. One Navy specialist described it as a soulless metal soldier built only to carry death across the ocean. Further inspection revealed the inner hull's acoustic insulation wasn't meant to muffle the engine. It was designed to mask human sound. The sealed chambers prevented sonar from distinguishing between mechanical vibrations and the crew's heartbeats. When the team realized this, a strange stillness filled the lab. There was something almost inhuman about the laying design, as if its creator knew the limits of humanity and was trying to transcend them. At 7:10 a.m., chemical analysis from the fuel compartment arrived. The sample contained lithium impurities and traces of jet fuel. The submarine didn't run on pure diesel, but on a hybrid blend derived from aircraft propulsion technology, optimized for low noise and high thermal efficiency. It was a hybrid of aircraft and submarine, of military industry and organized crime. Every legal boundary had been breached in its design. When the final engineer removed the last panel beneath the engine bay, the discovery froze the room. In a narrow corner, sealed under epoxy, was a small metal plate engraved with a single word, Veritas. In Latin, it meant truth. No one knew whether it was a manufacturer's signature or a challenge left for whoever uncovered it. But in that moment, everyone had understood. Whoever built this fleet wasn't just trafficking drugs, he was sending a message. By 8 a.m., the preliminary report was complete. The submarine was no longer cataloged as criminal evidence, it was reclassified as a Level 1 strategic object. In the final note, one officer wrote, "It wasn't built merely to transport, it was built to measure our response." Drain. That line ended the morning briefing but opened a far darker question. If this was only the first, how many more lie sleeping beneath the sea, waiting for their turn to rise? It wasn't a storm, nor artillery fire, but a 3-page internal report that silenced the entire U.S. Naval Command. Across the top, the title was printed in bold, "Submarine, Class 0 to 2 industrial prototype. Confirmed. In the past decade, no single document had shaken the American military quite like this. The Maritime Intelligence Directorate's analysis stated, the submarine captured in the Gulf of Mexico was only one among a fleet of 12, all originating from the same location, Puerto La Cruz, Venezuela. The SBIRS satellite system was immediately ordered to rescan the entire southern Caribbean within 36 hours. The results plunged every operations room from Washington to Norfolk into silence. Along the Venezuelan coastline appeared a series of industrial facilities disguised as seafood, processing plants, and civilian machine workshops. Beneath those rusted tin roofs were underground factories where cartel engineers were welding, drilling, and assembling semi-submersible vessels worth over $3 million each. Every hull bore a sequential serial code, confirming what no one wanted to admit. A true industrial production line was in operation. DEA logistics analysts ran the numbers. If each vessel could carry 3 tons per trip and make 4 runs a year, the total narcotics volume transported through this corridor would reach 40 tons per cycle, generating over $5 billion in annual revenue. But what frightened intelligence officials wasn't the figure, it was the organization behind it. Financial data revealed that all operational expenses, materials, lithium batteries, hybrid fuel, were paid through a virtual banking network in Europe, hidden under renewable energy investment portfolios. The criminal underworld had officially infiltrated the global commercial system. When the analytical map appeared on the command room's display, red lines connected Venezuela, Cuba, and Florida, a network pulsing like a hidden circulatory system. At its center lay the cartel's transfer zone, where support ships operated under the guise of international fishing vessels. Each carried reflective sonar arrays capable of generating false acoustic signals, tricking military radar with ghost echoes, resembling migrating whales. Naval strategists concluded grimly, this was no longer smuggling, it was unconventional warfare beneath the sea. The report even transcribed a brief exchange from the emergency intelligence hearing. If they can build 12, one analyst said quietly, they can build 30. No one replied. No one needed to, because it was true. At that moment, the United States was not merely confronting a cartel, it was facing a force with industrial infrastructure, global supply chains, and a clear military strategy. When satellite imaging data was finally processed, one detail stood out. Inside the main shipyard at Puerto La Cruz, amid hundreds of masked workers, a symbol was painted on the wall, a serpent coiled around an anchor. Beneath it, the words, Ordo Mare, Order of the Sea. It wasn't a cartel slogan. It was a strategic insignia. Military linguists traced the phrase to 19th century naval warfare manuscripts, references to private maritime wars, when nations covertly funded pirates to control trade routes. Now, that concept had returned reborn in the machinery of the modern drug industry. That afternoon, the Department of Defense issued a Level 4 alert for the entire Gulf of Mexico. Coast Guard cutters, Pate Ampères Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft, and MQ-9 Reaper drones were deployed in a vast ghost net formation, dividing the ocean into hundreds of surveillance grids. Each sector was monitored with multi-layer radar and passive sonar. Within 12 hours, the waters from Tampa to New Orleans were under total operational lockdown. Yet, even with all that power, no one dared to say they could stop it, because for every vessel destroyed, another was being born in the shadows. When the final screen went dark, Commander Rachel Decker stood in silence. She had heard the Ghost's engine herself in the deep, the sound that started it all. Now she understood that their victory that night was just a single frame in a far larger map of global crime. On her desk, the DEA intelligence report confirmed at least 3 submarines had already completed their missions undetected. That meant millions of doses had already entered the United States, hidden inside industrial containers, aboard legitimate cargo ships, woven into the arteries of global trade. Naval admirals gave the phenomenon a new name, the narco-submarine threat corridor. A criminal undersea highway, an invisible frontier that any nation could be pierced by. Each submarine was not just a smuggling vessel, but an armored bullet fired into the heart of national security. Every radar, every sonar array was powerless against those slow, silent shadows that knew how to vanish. That night, internal news bulletins gave no details, only a brief line. A ghost submarine captured. Origin, Venezuela. Oh, one. But behind closed doors, the numbers kept flashing on classified screens. 12 vessels under construction. 40 tons a year. $5 billion. And at the end of every number hung a question no one dared to answer. Was this still organized crime, or the dawn of a new power rising beneath the ocean? There was no victory bell that morning. When the sun rose over Pensacola, everyone understood they had touched something far too vast to be called merely a case. The ghost submarine was now just a dark, metallic carcass, heavy, silent, dragged from the boiling sea, yet within it lay a warning from the future. What seemed like the end of an operation had instead opened another door, darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than anything the U.S. Navy had ever faced in modern history. At 8 a.m., when the crew of USCGC Hamilton returned to deck, the sea no longer smelled of smoke and gunpowder. It carried a cold metallic scent, like the lingering breath of the machine that had fought them through the night. A few engineers whispered that the submarine's central chamber was still radiating heat, even though its engine was destroyed. The last lines of sensor data showed a slow, steady temperature increase in the battery bay, as if something inside was still alive. By 8:10 a.m., an emergency meeting was convened inside the aircraft hangar at the Pensacola base. 3 agencies were present: the DEA, the U.S. Navy, and Homeland Security. The initial report confirmed over 2,200 pounds of methamphetamine and 480 liters of base cocaine, valued at $415 million USD. But that number wasn't what froze the room. It was the data retrieved from the navigation module. In the recovered memory logs were 3 complete routes, each crossing different points along the Gulf Coast: Tampa Bay, New Orleans, and Biloxi. 2 were marked as completed. That meant at least 2 previous runs had succeeded. When the routing map appeared on the projection screen, silence fell. From above, the United States looked as though it had been pierced by 3 thin red veins, stretching from Venezuela to the Florida Gulf. No one spoke, but everyone understood. Billions in narcotics had passed undetected beneath what was supposed to be the safest coastline in the world. One officer finally whispered, barely audible, "We weren't infiltrated, we were tested." At 9:15 a.m., joint intelligence reports from Naval Intelligence and Homeland Security arrived. Satellite data confirmed 12 submarines of the same class had been launched in the past 4 months, all from camouflage shipyards in Puerto La Cruz, financed by a cartel faction, working alongside elements of the Venezuelan military. Each craft cost about $3 million USD, powered by Shenzhen-manufactured lithium batteries, radar-absorbing polymer hulls, and hybrid engines derived from jet propulsion systems. Analysts labeled the design Narco Subtype Zero Class, a vessel that could not exist without the hands of engineers trained in military technology. The report contained one line that weighed on everyone present: estimated annual transport capacity 40 tons. That meant 40 tons of narcotics could cross the ocean every year, worth $5 billion, or over 80 million doses on U.S. soil. When the number was read aloud, no one said another word. The air felt dense, as if the entire room could hear the ocean sighing outside. Amid the tension, Commander Rachel Decker rose to speak. Behind her, the magnified image of the burnt submarine filled the screen's scorched welds, varped steel rips. She said only one sentence: "This isn't a smuggling vessel, it's a weapon." No one disagreed. Every piece of evidence supported it. The hull design, radar-absorbing skin, acoustic stealth system, none were made to escape. They were built to engage. A weapon disguised as a crime designed to test the reaction time of a nation. That afternoon, security analysts shifted to tracing the financial network. Funds were routed through more than 27 shell companies, passing from Panama to Zurich, then into small investment funds in Singapore. The trail ended at an entity named Valoria Maritime Holdings. No registration, no headquarters. Yet it owned over 16 commercial cargo vessels operating across the Caribbean, all traveling through zones where radar had previously gone dark when the ghost appeared. By evening, after an emergency meeting in Washington, defense officials agreed to raise the Caribbean threat level to Maritime Threat Condition Bravo. Patrol grids were expanded. Bases from Key West to Corpus Christi activated low-band radar and synchronized sonar networks. But deep down, no one believed it would be enough. Every time the U.S. tightened its defenses, the enemy seemed to move one step ahead, diving deeper, hiding better, thinking faster. When night fell, the red beacon lights from the recovered submarine reflected across the plain. Hamilton's hull like the dying gaze of a vanishing creature. But none of the sailors believed it was truly dead. They felt somewhere beneath the waves, engines still hummed, signals still pulsed, and other vessels waited for their turn to rise. In that quiet, one thought echoed across every mind. The real war had just begun. No one realized that even as the surface grew calm again, the war had never ended. Beneath the placid waters of the Gulf of Mexico, the wreck's remains were more than scorched. Metal, they were evidence of an organized system beyond human imagination. When Navy divers began retrieving data modules from the debris, the sonar readings brought the command center to silence. The wreck rested 60 feet deep, tilted 12 degrees to port. Its hull broken in two, yet the lithium batteries still emitted heat. Though neutralized, the submarine was, in some way, still alive. Engineers called it residual heat. But for those who had fought it, it felt like a heartbeat refusing to stop. From cracks in the midsection, thin streams of air escaped, rising as chains of bubbles, the dying whispers of a machine that refused to die. Each sonar sweep returned a deep echo, like a pulse from the abyss, cold, heavy, haunting. No one said it aloud, but in the back of every mind was the same thought. Something down there was listening. At 10:30 a.m., the first salvage report reached operational command. Under the steel plating, inspection cameras found a thin data cable running the length of this hull, linked to the navigation bay. It wasn't part of the original blueprint. Experts concluded it was an external uplink, likely for transmitting data to a remote server. The frightening part, the cartel's own technical logs contained no record of it. That meant a third party had intervened during construction, secretly embedding a monitoring system inside. When the remaining memory of the NAV-02 module was decrypted, the last coordinates did not match any known trade route. They led to a patch of international waters between Cuba and Honduras, an area with no commercial traffic, no seismic data, no apparent reason to exist. Further analysis revealed that over the past 3 months, civilian satellite signals had been disrupted 12 times in that exact location, each lasting between 7 and 10 minutes. Until the submarine's capture, the Caribbean Security Network had dismissed those as technical errors. When that data was overlaid onto global thermal maps, a pattern emerged, a spiral formation, its center at the deepest part of the basin. No shipping routes crossed it, no seismic activity, no logical explanation. Naval scientists dubbed it the silent zone, a region where radar waves vanished without echo. Physics couldn't explain it. But in private DEA briefings, agents began using another term, the ocean relay. No one knew what the relay was, who built it, or why it sat at the heart of a transnational smuggling network. Only one fact was certain. Every cartel submarine, regardless of origin, passed through that coordinate at least once before turning north. The network operated like an artificial undersea ecosystem, self-coordinating, self-communicating, and invisible to civilian radar. Naval technologists called it the dawn of sub-mechanized warfare, a new kind of conflict, without flags, without borders, fought by machines that obeyed commands from the unseen. When this information was presented at the Pentagon's Emergency Council, a suffocating silence filled the room. A counterintelligence officer spoke quietly. "We're not fighting a cartel, we're fighting a doctrine." No one argued. Because it was true. The drug war had outgrown crime. It had become a war of technology. That afternoon, the Navy's Special Investigation Unit began salvaging the remaining power core from the wreck. When they removed the protective casing, they found a small Latin engraving on the alloy. Frame, Initium, the beginning. Analysts didn't know what it meant, but one thing was clear. The maker wanted to leave a Botes and Hersesli two-piece signature, a declaration that what happened in Pensacola was only the opening act. At the same time, coastal monitoring systems detected faint sonar traces 200 nautical miles east of the recovery site, a 42 Hz tone, cycling every 18 seconds, perfectly matching the Ghost sub's propulsion signature. Naval radar lost contact within minutes, but in the raw feed, 3 faint blips appeared, then faded, like 3 living things descending into the thermocline. Everyone in the monitoring room understood what it meant. There were others. At 13:15, an encrypted message reached Central Command. Request authorization for a 90-day full Caribbean surveillance operation. The order was signed instantly. Yet in the conference room, no one felt relief. They knew this was no longer a pursuit. It was the opening of a new front beneath the sea, one humanity had never named. At the bottom of that day's final report, Commander Rachel Decker, the first to ever see the host, left a handwritten line firm, unshaken ink. If we refuse to listen to the voice of the ocean one day, it will speak in the language of war.